I never imagined being handcuffed in the lobby of my own company, cold steel cutting into my wrists as employees watched in horror. As CEO of a Fortune 500 bank, I'd navigated boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, but nothing prepared me for being treated like a criminal in the building that bears my signature on its paychecks. The autumn wind howled against the glass facade of Stanhope Financial's headquarters in downtown Chicago. 60 stories of steel and glass pierced the skyline, a monument to financial power where Aisha Jordan had just completed her first month as CEO. The digital clock on her desk blinked 8:47 p.m. Another late night, putting final touches on the diversity initiative she would announce tomorrow. Aisha gathered her papers, smoothed her charcoal suit, and shut down her computer. The emptiness of the executive floor amplified every sound. The click of her heels on marble, the soft whir of the climate system, the ping of the elevator arriving. She stepped in, exhaling the day's tension as she descended to the lobby, the security desk, a new guard, temporary staff filling in for the regular team, looked up from his monitor. His eyes narrowed slightly at her approach. She nodded politely. "Working late again, MS?" His tone carried an edge. "Jordan. Aisha Jordan," she replied, accustomed to introducing herself despite her photo hanging in the entrance hall. "Have a good night." The guard's gaze followed her, his hand hovering near the phone. As soon as Aisha turned toward the revolving doors, he dialed. His whispered report carried across the marble expanse. "Suspicious person exiting the executive floor. Black woman, claims to be an employee. No visible ID badge." Outside, blue and red lights suddenly splashed across the building's glass front. 2 patrol cars skidded to a halt. 4 officers emerged, hands on holsters, approaching the entrance with practiced urgency. Aisha turned at the commotion, her briefcase clutched against her chest. The revolving door pushed open behind her as Officers Hill and Ramirez entered, faces tense. "Chicago PD, don't move," Officer Hill commanded, his voice bouncing off the high ceiling. "Excuse me," Aisha replied, confusion washing over her. "There must be some mistake. Hands where we can see them." Now, Ramirez approached from her left, gun drawn. The lobby security guard pointed. "That's her, claiming to be an executive." Time compressed. Before Aisha could produce her credentials, Officer Hill spun her around, slamming her against the marble wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Cold metal clasped her wrists as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I'm the CEO of this bank." Her voice echoed through the lobby, disbelief edging into panic. "My ID is in my pocket. Check." "My ID. Sure you are," Hill muttered, tightening the cuffs another notch. The steel bit into her skin. The elevator doors opened. Karen Liu, Stanhope's CFO, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened at the scene before her. Her boss pressed against the wall, handcuffed. "What are you doing?" Karen shouted, rushing forward. "That's Aisha Jordan. She's our CEO." 2 junior analysts emerging behind Karen pulled out phones, recording. The night cleaning crew stopped their work, watching in stunned silence. Through the glass doors, pedestrians slowed, gawking at the drama unfolding in the prestigious bank's lobby. "Call Malik," Aisha instructed Karen, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Now, the officers continued their search, deaf to the protests rising around them. Aisha's briefcase contents spilled across the floor, confidential reports, her company keycard, family photos scattered like fallen leaves. "The handcuffs are completely unnecessary," Aisha stated, her professional tone betrayed by a slight tremor. "I've done nothing wrong. I work here. I run this company." Officer Ramirez shook his head. "We received a call about unauthorized access to executive floors. Protocol is protocol." The cold floor beneath her knees. The eyes of her employees witnessing her humiliation. The pressure of the cuffs digging into her wrists. Every sensation burned into Aisha's memory as her dignity was stripped away in the building she commanded. "I've spent 20 years climbing corporate ladders," she thought, only to be pulled down in 20 seconds. Through the revolving doors burst Malik Carter, Stanhope's general counsel, phone pressed to his ear. His eyes locked with Aisha's. Fury and determination flashed between them. He marched toward the officers, legal credentials already extended. "I'm calling Chief Hernandez directly," he announced, voice carrying across the lobby. And I suggest you remove those handcuffs immediately before this becomes a career-ending mistake for both of you. Whispers rippled through the growing crowd. Phones captured every moment. The security guard who made the call shrank back, suddenly. Uncertain, Aisha closed her eyes briefly, the weight of the moment crushing against her chest. I've led merger negotiations worth billions, she thought. I've testified before Congress. And yet here I am, powerless in my own building because of the color of my skin. The revolving doors spun again. The air in the lobby shifted. Chief Maria Hernandez had arrived 20 years earlier. Aisha Jordan sat nervously in Stanhope Financial's reception area, clutching her freshly printed resume. A finance degree from Howard University and an MBA from Wharton had earned her this interview, but experience had taught her that credentials alone weren't always enough. Ms. Jordan, the receptionist's voice cut through her thoughts. They're ready for you. That day, Aisha joined Stanhope as a junior financial analyst, one of 3 Black employees in a department of 60. Her cubicle sat in the farthest corner of the floor, away from the windows and executive offices. Each morning, she arrived an hour early. Each evening, she stayed late, analyzing market trends and preparing reports that consistently exceeded expectations. You work twice as hard to get half as far, her father had told her. A retired accountant who'd been passed over for promotion 7 times. He'd instilled in her a resilience that bordered on relentless. By her 3rd year, Aisha's market predictions had caught the attention of the board. They promoted her to senior analyst, then investment strategist, though colleagues whispered about diversity hires when they thought she couldn't hear. Your performance reviews are exemplary, her supervisor noted during her 5th year evaluation. But some clients find you intimidating. Perhaps try smiling more. Aisha nodded politely while making mental notes for her evening journaling, a practice that kept her sane through years of such comments. That night, she wrote, "Intimidating equals competent while Black." Noted. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Aisha's conservative investment strategies saved Stanhope millions while competitors collapsed. The board took notice. She advanced to vice president of strategic investments, then senior VP, each step accompanied by suspicious glances and backhanded compliments. "You're not like other Black executives," a board member once told her at a charity gala, champagne sloshing in his glass. "You're so articulate." Aisha met Malik Carter during a corporate restructuring in 2015. As the newly appointed general counsel, he recognized her talent immediately and became both mentor and ally. "They don't see what I see," he told her over coffee one morning. "But they will." When CEO Harrison Reynolds announced his retirement in 2022, the board conducted a nationwide search for his replacement. Despite being an internal candidate with unmatched credentials, Aisha faced 6 rounds of interviews, while external white candidates advanced with just 2. "They're looking for reasons to disqualify you," Malik warned. "Don't give them any." The final decision came down to Aisha and Bradley Thornton, a Harvard-educated banker with half her experience but twice her confidence. The board vote split 7-6 in her favor, the narrowest margin in Stanhope's history. The announcement made headlines. Stanhope Financial names first Black female CEO. Business magazines featured her on their covers. The New York Times ran a profile titled "Breaking the Glass Ceiling in Banking." Overnight, Aisha became a symbol, her success no longer entirely her own. The congratulatory flowers had barely wilted when the challenges began. In her first executive meeting, CFO Thomas Warner interrupted her 4 times before Malik stepped in. "Perhaps we should let our CEO finish her thought," he suggested firmly. At industry conferences, peers approached her husband David first, assuming he was the executive. During client calls, new accounts would ask to speak with someone in charge. After hearing her voice, her executive assistant fielded emails asking when Mr. Jordan would be available. The boardroom became a minefield of microaggressions. When she proposed expanding into underserved markets, Warner called it overly idealistic. When she pushed for more transparent lending practices, another executive suggested she didn't understand the realities of banking. "I've been in this industry for 20 years, she reminded them calmly. "I understand the realities perfectly." Even her appearance became subject to scrutiny. When she wore her hair natural, Financial blogs commented on her unprofessional look. When she straightened it, internal gossip suggested she was trying to appear white. Her wardrobe choices made financial news, critiques that her male predecessors never faced. The Chicago Economic Club invited her to speak at their annual dinner. During the Q&A, an elderly banker asked, "Don't you think your appointment was partly due to the current climate around diversity?" The room fell silent. Cameras focused on her face. "My appointment," she replied evenly, "was due to 20 years of exceptional performance, crisis management expertise, and vision for the future of banking. The current climate merely removed some of the barriers that might have prevented the board from seeing those qualifications clearly." The audience applauded, but the question lingered in subsequent profiles and interviews. Always the subtext: did she really earn this? Each morning, Aisha arrived at her corner office by 6:30 a.m., reviewing quarterly projections before most executives had their first coffee. Each night, she left well after dark, often the last car in the executive garage. The weight of representation pressed on her shoulders, knowing her performance would affect opportunities for those who followed. "You can't just succeed," her mother had told her. "You have to succeed so completely that they can't question your right to be there." 3 weeks into her role as CEO, Aisha called an all-hands meeting to unveil her first major initiative, the Stanhope Inclusion Project. The plan included doubling minority recruitment, establishing a $50 million fund for businesses in underserved communities, and implementing bias training for all management. The executive floor buzzed with tension. Warner cornered her before the announcement. "The board feels this is too much, too soon," he warned. "Some members think you're pushing a personal agenda rather than focusing on shareholder value." Aisha smiled. "The data shows diverse companies outperform homogeneous ones by 35%. This isn't personal, it's profitable." The announcement received mixed reactions. Junior staff applauded enthusiastically while several executives crossed their arms, expressions tight. Financial news covered it extensively, with commentators split on whether it represented the future of banking or identity politics invading finance. That evening, the night of the incident, Aisha had stayed late finalizing implementation details. Her laptop screen illuminated pages of resistance she'd need to overcome: budget concerns, timeline objections, thinly veiled opposition from conservative board members. "They'll adjust," she told herself, shutting down her computer. "Results will speak for themselves." At the security desk, Leonard Phillips checked his watch. 8 hours into a 12-hour shift, his third consecutive night covering for a colleague. The lobby's emptiness amplified his fatigue. When movement caught his eye on the executive floor security feed, he straightened up. A woman in a dark suit exited the CEO's office, placing documents in her briefcase. Phillips frowned. He'd been briefed about the new CEO, a man named Jordan or Johnson, but hadn't seen him in person yet. This woman wasn't on his list of authorized late-night personnel, but he watched her enter the elevator, heart rate increasing. 3 break-ins had occurred at neighboring buildings that month. The security company had issued warnings about corporate espionage targeting financial institutions. As the elevator descended, Phillips pulled up the after-hours authorization list. No women were approved for the executive floor that evening. He reached for the phone, dialing the direct police line his supervisor had highlighted for emergencies. "Chicago Police Department. This is security at Stanhope Financial," Phillips reported, voice low. "Possible unauthorized access to executive offices. Subject is now heading through the main lobby. Black female, approximately 40, business attire, carrying documents. Any visible weapons or threatening behavior? Negative, but she's exiting the CEO's private office with confidential materials. Units are responding. Keep visual contact, but do not engage." 3 blocks away, Officers Hill and Ramirez received the call. Their shift had been quiet. The prospect of action at a high-profile location sent adrenaline coursing through their veins. "Possible corporate theft in progress," the dispatcher relayed. "Suspect described as professional-appearing black female. Unauthorized in executive areas." Hill accelerated, siren wailing. "Probably cleaning staff where they shouldn't be," he commented. Ramirez nodded. "Or someone's assistant taking what isn't hers." They arrived at Stanhope's entrance in 4 minutes, joined by a second patrol car. The four officers conferred briefly before entering, hands hovering near their weapons. The security guard pointed toward Aisha, who stood near the revolving doors checking her phone. What happened next would become headline news by morning. That Aisha's experience wasn't isolated. Across America, successful black professionals regularly faced similar indignities. In San Francisco, venture capitalist Richard Templeton was detained while showing investors around his own tech startup. Security assumed he was trespassing until three white colleagues vouched for him. Dr. Claudia Mitchell, chief of surgery at Boston Memorial, was stopped by hospital security while entering the doctor's lounge after hours. Despite wearing her white coat with credentials clearly displayed, guards insisted she didn't look like she belonged there. Investment banker Marcus Washington was handcuffed in the parking garage of his Manhattan firm when a colleague reported a suspicious person near the executive vehicles. The suspicious activity was Washington retrieving documents from his BMW. Professor James Wilson was teaching late at Columbia University when campus police entered his classroom, demanding identification. A janitor had reported an unauthorized person in the building. 6 students witnessed their distinguished professor being escorted out. Real estate developer Elijah Brooks was showing a property to clients when neighbors called police reporting a break-in. Officers arrived with guns drawn, forcing Brooks to the ground despite his business attire and property documents in hand. Each incident followed the same pattern. Accomplished black professionals in their rightful places reduced to suspects because they didn't look like they belonged. Each carried the same message. Success didn't provide immunity from bias. Each left invisible scars that never fully healed. Aisha stood handcuffed in her own building. She joined this brotherhood and sisterhood of the wrongfully accused, professionals whose credentials, accomplishments, and positions of authority proved insufficient protection against deeply rooted assumptions. The difference? Most incidents ended with quiet apologies and buried reports. Aisha's was happening under the watchful eyes of witnesses, cameras, and, soon, the chief of police herself. Face the wall, Officer Hill commanded, his voice echoing through the marble lobby. The handcuffs bit into Aisha's wrists as she complied, forehead pressed against the cold surface. "This is a mistake," Aisha stated, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm Aisha Jordan, Chief Executive Officer of Stanhope Financial. My identification is in my jacket pocket." Officer Ramirez snorted. "Yeah, and I'm Warren Buffett. We got a call about unauthorized access to the executive floor. I have authorization because I run this company," Aisha replied, each word precise and measured. "If you check my ID." "Quiet," Hill interrupted, pulling her wallet from her pocket. He flipped it open, eyes narrowing at her driver's license. "Aisha Jordan. Doesn't mean you belong in the CEO's office after hours." The security guard shifted uncomfortably behind them. She was exiting the executive suite with documents. "No one on my authorized list matched her description." "Because I don't need authorization for my own office," Aisha countered, frustration edging into her voice. "Call any board member. Google my name. Look at the portrait in the entryway." Hill exchanged glances with Ramirez, doubt flickering across his face. But instead of loosening the cuffs, he pressed on. "We need to verify your story. How did you access the executive floor?" "With my keycard. The same keycard that's in my briefcase that your partner just emptied onto the floor." Ramirez rifled through the scattered papers, finding the Stanhope ID with Aisha Jordan, Chief Executive Officer, printed beneath her photo. He held it up, hesitation crossing his features. "Could be fake," Hill muttered, though his confidence was visibly wavering. "Call it in," Ramirez suggested. "Have dispatch contact someone who can verify." Hill nodded, stepping back while maintaining his grip on Aisha's arm. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hill. Need verification on a suspect claiming to be the CEO of Stanhope Financial. Name, Aisha Jordan." The growing crowd of employees watched in horrified silence. Night cleaning staff froze mid-task. Security cameras whirred overhead, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. "Please remove these handcuffs," Aisha requested, dignity intact despite the humiliation. "They're unnecessary and painful." "Protocol." "Ma'am," Hill replied mechanically, "until we verify your identity." "My identity is verified by the 20 witnesses watching you detain their boss," Aisha countered, nodding toward the gathering employees. And by the security cameras recording this incident for tomorrow's lawsuit. The radio crackled. Hill, be advised, dispatch is confirming Stanhope Financial CEO is listed as Aisha Jordan. Attempting contact with corporate security for further verification. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Hill's face, but his grip remained firm. We still need to complete our investigation. Someone reported unauthorized access. That someone, Aisha replied, eyes locking with the security guard, made an assumption based on what he thought a CEO should look like. The elevator doors opened. Again, and Malik Carter burst into the lobby, phone pressed to his ear. His face hardened at the sight of Aisha handcuffed against the wall. I need to speak with Chief Hernandez immediately, he barked into the phone. This is Malik Carter, General Counsel for Stanhope Financial. Your officers are currently detaining our CEO in our headquarters building. Yes, I'll hold. He approached. The officers, credentials extended. I'm the chief legal officer of this institution. Release Ms. Jordan immediately. Hill shook his head. Sir, we're conducting an investigation. You're conducting a violation of her civil rights, Malik interrupted, voice sharp as steel, and creating significant liability for your department. Karen Liu pushed through the growing crowd, iPad in hand. I have the press release from 3 weeks ago announcing Aisha's appointment, she said, thrusting the device toward Officer Ramirez. And here's her official corporate biography with photo. I'm the chief financial officer. We work together daily. Ramirez studied the iPad, doubt creeping across his features. Officer Hill, we may have a situation here. Hill's radio crackled. Again, Unit 327, be advised, Stanhope Security confirms Aisha Jordan is the CEO. Repeat, suspect is confirmed as the legitimate CEO. The lobby fell silent, all eyes on Hill. His jaw tightened as he processed the information. We still received a call. About suspicious activity, he insisted, though his voice had lost its authority. The suspicious activity, Karen shot back, was a black woman occupying the CEO's office. That's not a crime. It's her job. Malik's phone call connected. Chief Hernandez? This is Malik Carter. Chicago PD officers are currently detaining Aisha Jordan. Yes, the CEO of Stanhope, in our headquarters building. She's handcuffed in our lobby with at least 20 witnesses. Yes, handcuffed. Officer Hill and Officer Ramirez. Thank you, Chief. He lowered the phone, eyes boring into Hill. Chief Hernandez is en route. She suggested you might want to remove those handcuffs before she arrives. Hill hesitated, looking to Ramirez for support. Ramirez gave a slight nod. We're following protocol for a reported security breach, Hill stated, though his words sounded hollow even to himself. The only security breach, Malik replied coldly, is your judgment. Every second those handcuffs remain is another zero on the settlement check. The revolving doors spun as Chief Maria Hernandez entered the lobby. Compact and commanding in her dress uniform, she assessed the scene with a veteran's efficiency. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes flashed with barely contained fury when they landed on Aisha's handcuffed wrists. Officers, she acknowledged, voice deceptively calm. Status report. Hill straightened, suddenly acutely aware of the optics. Chief, we responded to a call about unauthorized access to the executive floor. Subject identified herself as the CEO, but has her identity been verified? Hernandez interrupted. Yes, but then why is she still in handcuffs? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Hill fumbled with the keys, avoiding eye contact as he released Aisha's wrists. Red marks remained where the metal had dug into her skin. Hernandez turned to Aisha, professionalism masking her dismay. Ms. Jordan, I deeply apologize for this incident. Are you injured? Aisha rubbed her wrists, wincing slightly. Nothing permanent, Chief. Though my dignity might take longer to recover. The chief nodded, understanding the layers beneath those words. She turned back to her officers, voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Outside. Now. As the officers followed Hernandez toward the entrance, Malik stepped to Aisha's side, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. Karen quickly gathered the scattered contents of Aisha's briefcase. Are you okay? Malik asked softly. No. Aisha admitted, the simple honesty more powerful than any elaborate response. But I will be. Through the glass doors, The lobby occupants watched Chief Hernandez confront her officers. Though they couldn't hear the exchange, her body language conveyed everything. Rigid posture, sharp gestures, and the officers' increasingly defensive stances. Inside, Aisha accepted a glass of water from her assistant, who had arrived during the commotion. Employees gathered at a respectful distance, their expressions a mixture of shock, sympathy, and anger on her behalf. 8 minutes, Karen murmured, checking the security footage timestamp on her tablet. They kept you handcuffed. For 8 minutes after confirming your identity. The revolving door spun again as Chief Hernandez re-entered, leaving the officers outside. She approached Aisha directly, official demeanor softened by genuine regret. Ms. Jordan, Officers Hill and Ramirez have been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Their badges and service weapons have been surrendered. I've also requested the body camera footage be preserved as evidence. Aisha nodded, professional mask firmly back in place despite the emotion churning beneath. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your swift response. This isn't over, Hernandez continued. I'd like to meet with you and your legal team tomorrow to discuss next steps. The department takes this incident extremely seriously. Malik stepped forward. We'll clear the CEO's morning schedule. The security guard who had made the initial call stood awkwardly by his desk, face ashen. Chief Hernandez beckoned him over. Your name and employment details, please, she requested, pulling out a notepad. Leonard Phillips, ma'am. Northwestern. Security Services, contracted to Stanhope Financial. Mr. Phillips, you'll be contacted by Internal Affairs tomorrow. I suggest you prepare a detailed statement explaining your actions tonight. Phillips nodded miserably, suddenly understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Outside the building, red and blue lights continued to pulse against the glass facade. But they were now joined by the white glare of news vans pulling up to the curb. A reporter from Channel 5 was already doing a stand-up report on the sidewalk, gesturing toward the lobby. Breaking news tonight from downtown Chicago, where sources tell us the recently appointed CEO of Stanhope Financial, one of the city's largest banks, was reportedly handcuffed by police inside her own building. Aisha watched through the glass, the reality sinking in. Her most humiliating professional moment was about to become tomorrow's headline. Malik, she said quietly, we need a statement prepared. I want to control this narrative before speculation takes over. Malik nodded, already typing on his phone. We go on offense. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about every black professional who's been questioned, stopped, or suspected simply for existing in spaces others don't expect to see them. Through the revolving doors, microphones and cameras gathered. Like storm clouds, the news crews had spotted Chief Hernandez's vehicle and were pressing against the security perimeter, hungry for details. Aisha straightened her suit jacket, took a deep breath, and made a decision. Tell them I'll speak to the press in 30 minutes. This story will be told, but I'll be the one telling it. By dawn, the video had gone viral. Security footage from the lobby, leaked by an anonymous employee, showed Aisha Jordan, CEO of Stanhope Financial, handcuffed against a wall in her own building. Every major network carried the story. Black female CEO detained in own company building. In Malik's office, Aisha reviewed the formal complaint they'd drafted overnight. 10 pages detailing the incident, citing violations of protocol, civil rights infringements, and demands for accountability. This complaint goes directly to the police commissioner, the mayor's office, and the Civilian Oversight Board, Malik explained, sliding the document across his desk. Once you sign, there's no turning back. Aisha's pen hovered over the signature line. Any potential drawbacks for Stanhope? Some conservative clients might pull accounts. Stock might fluctuate temporarily, but silence would cost us more in the long run, especially with your diversity initiative launching. She signed with a decisive flourish. File it immediately. Outside, journalists camped in the plaza, hoping for a statement. Aisha had spent the early morning hours preparing, rejecting both corporate platitudes and expressions of outrage in favor of measured strength. At precisely 9 a.m. She stepped onto the plaza, flanked by Malik and Karen. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. Good morning, she began, voice steady despite her sleepless night. Last evening, I experienced something that thousands of Black Americans face daily: the assumption of wrongdoing based solely on appearance. As CEO of Stanhope Financial, I was handcuffed in my own building after being reported as a suspicious person. The officers involved disregarded clear evidence of my identity and position. She paused, allowing the cameras to capture her composed expression. This incident reflects broader issues in our society, issues that Stanhope's new inclusion initiative aims to address. I filed a formal complaint not for personal vindication, but to ensure accountability and prevent similar occurrences. No one should fear being criminalized in their workplace, regardless of their position or appearance. Questions erupted from the press corps. Will you sue the police department? Do you believe race was a factor? Has the security guard been fired? Aisha addressed each with precision, neither downplaying the incident nor inflaming tensions. When asked if she felt angry, she replied simply, "Anger without action accomplishes nothing. I choose action." By noon, #StandWithAisha was trending nationally. Corporate leaders issued statements condemning the incident. Civil rights organizations called for systemic police reform. Financial analysts debated potential impacts on Stanhope's stock price. The narrative had shifted. Aisha was no longer merely a victim. She had become the calm, authoritative voice at the center of a national conversation. The Stanhope boardroom hummed with tension as directors assembled for the emergency meeting. Several joined virtually, their faces grim on the wall-mounted screens. Chairman Douglas Whitmore called the room to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. "Before we begin, I want to express my personal outrage over last night's events," Whitmore stated, his usual corporate reserve cracking. "Aisha, on behalf of the entire board, I offer our unequivocal support." Around the table, heads nodded, some vigorously, others with visible reluctance. Thomas Warner, the CFO who had opposed Aisha's diversity initiative, studied his hands. "Our first priority is supporting our CEO," Whitmore continued. "Our second is managing the corporate response to protect Stanhope's reputation and values." Warner cleared his throat. "While I deplore what happened, we must consider shareholder concerns." The stock dropped 3 points this morning. Some major clients have called with questions. Karen Liu cut in sharply. "Those questions represent exactly why Aisha's inclusion initiative is necessary. If clients are more concerned about our CEO standing up for herself than about the injustice she faced, perhaps we should reconsider those relationships." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Warner flushed, but remained silent. Director Elena Rodriguez leaned forward. "I propose an official board statement supporting Aisha without reservation, accelerated implementation of the inclusion initiative, and termination of our contract with Northwestern Security Services." "Seconded," called voices from around the table. Whitmore turned to Aisha. "As CEO, your voice carries the most weight here. What would you like to see from the board?" All eyes turned to her. In that moment, Aisha recognized the rare opportunity before her: the power to transform a personal humiliation into institutional change. "I appreciate the support," she began carefully, "but performative outrage isn't enough. I want 3 concrete actions. First, double the funding for our inclusion initiative. Second, implement mandatory bias training for all employees, including the board. Third, establish a foundation to support victims of racial profiling and police misconduct." Silence fell as the directors processed her requests. These weren't symbolic gestures. They required significant financial commitment and personal involvement. Warner shifted uncomfortably. "The budget implications are minimal compared to the lawsuit we'd face if we mishandle this," Malik interjected smoothly. "The market responds to decisive leadership, not hesitation." One by one, the directors voiced their support. Even Warner eventually nodded, recognizing the shifting tide. Whitmore called for a formal vote. The resolution passed unanimously. "It's settled," then, he announced. "Stanhope Financial stands firmly with our CEO and commits to these substantive changes. Now, let's discuss implementation." As the meeting continued, Aisha felt a subtle but profound shift in the room's dynamics. The board members who had once questioned her qualifications now looked to her for guidance. Those who had resisted her initiatives now championed them. It was a bittersweet victory. The respect she'd spent years earning had finally arrived, catalyzed by public humiliation rather than professional achievement. At Chicago Police Headquarters, Chief Hernandez faced a phalanx of reporters. Behind her stood the police commissioner and the mayor's diversity liaison, their presence underscoring the incident's gravity. The Chicago Police Department has placed officers James Hill and Miguel Ramirez on administrative leave pending a complete investigation, Hernandez announced. We've reviewed preliminary evidence, including body camera footage and security video from Stanhope Financial. The officers' actions appear inconsistent with department policy regarding identification verification and use of restraints. A reporter shouted, "Was racial bias a factor?" Hernandez didn't flinch. "We're examining all aspects of the incident, including potential bias in both the initial call and the officer's response. I've ordered an immediate department-wide review of our protocols for responding to private security calls and verification procedures before detention." Inside the Internal Affairs Division, the investigation proceeded with unusual speed. Hill and Ramirez sat in separate interview rooms, reviewing their body camera footage with union representatives. "I followed protocol," Hill insisted to the IA investigator. "We received a call about unauthorized access to a restricted area. After Ms. Jordan identified herself as the CEO, did you take steps to verify her claim before handcuffing her?" the investigator asked. "The identification could have been fake. We needed to secure the scene first. Yet security camera footage shows you maintained the handcuffs for 8 minutes after dispatch confirmed her identity. Can you explain that decision?" Hill shifted uncomfortably. "We were still investigating the original call." In the adjacent room, Ramirez proved more forthcoming. "We should have removed the cuffs immediately after verification," he admitted. "That was a mistake. Did you consider that implicit bias might have influenced your response?" Ramirez paused, genuinely reflecting. "Maybe. We responded to the security guard's suspicion without questioning why he found her presence suspicious in the first place." The body camera footage revealed damning details. Aisha's repeated calm identification, the officer's dismissive responses, her visible wince as the handcuffs tightened. Most troubling was Hill's muttered comment to Ramirez, caught on audio, "These diversity hires always cause problems." By week's end, the investigation concluded with unprecedented speed. Chief Hernandez personally delivered the findings at a press conference. Officers Hill and Ramirez violated multiple departmental policies, including improper use of restraints, failure to properly identify a subject, and disregarding verified identification. Additionally, the investigation revealed concerning comments suggesting bias played a role in their decision-making. She paused, allowing cameras to capture her resolute expression. Effective immediately, Officer Hill has been terminated from the Chicago Police Department. Officer Ramirez has been suspended without pay for 30 days and will undergo comprehensive retraining before returning to duty. Furthermore, we're implementing mandatory bias training for all officers and revising our protocols for responding to private security calls. The swift, decisive action sent shockwaves through the department and a clear message to the public. No one, regardless of badge or position, was exempt from accountability. That on Sunday morning, 3 days after the incident, hundreds gathered in the plaza outside Stanhope headquarters. What began as a small protest organized by local activists had evolved into a community rally, with business leaders, civil rights advocates, and everyday citizens standing shoulder to shoulder, signs bobbed above the crowd. "CEOs come in all colors and respect Black excellence, and accountability matters." Local news captured the diverse assembly: grandmothers with church groups, students from nearby universities, executives in weekend casual wear. Reverend Marcus Williams, a prominent civil rights leader, addressed the crowd. "What happened to Aisha Jordan could happen to any of us, regardless of title, regardless of achievement. The difference is, she had the platform to demand justice. Today, we stand with her to ensure that justice extends to those without her resources or visibility." Across the city, similar conversations unfolded. In barbershops and brunches, over dinner tables and social media, Chicagoans debated police protocols, corporate responsibility, and the persistent reality of racial bias. The ripple effects spread beyond Chicago. Major corporations announced reviews of their security procedures. Police departments across the country issued statements about verification protocols. Universities incorporated the incident into business ethics curricula, financial publications that initially questioned whether Aisha's response might harm Stanhope now reported on the company's rising stock price, up 5 points as investors responded positively to the board's decisive handling of the crisis. Applications for positions at Stanhope increased dramatically, particularly from minority candidates attracted by the company's clear stance. Northwestern Security Services lost contracts with 3 major Chicago corporations. Their CEO issued a public apology and announced company-wide retraining. Leonard Phillips, the guard who made the call, was reassigned to a non-client-facing position, a TA community forum hosted by Stanhope. Everyday citizens shared similar experiences. A black doctor barred from entering the hospital's physician's lounge. A Latino executive followed by store security while shopping. An Indian software engineer questioned by neighbors while entering his own apartment building. Aisha attended, listening more than speaking. Afterward, a young black woman studying finance approached her. Before all this happened, I questioned whether corporate America had a place for people like me, she admitted. Seeing how you handled it, with dignity and strength, gave me hope. That evening, alone in her office, Aisha reflected on the week's events. The trauma remained. She still flinched at unexpected noises, still felt phantom pressure around her wrists. But alongside the pain had emerged something unexpected, a platform, with greater reach and resonance than she'd ever anticipated. I never wanted to be a symbol. Aisha's voice narrates over images of the week's events. I spent 20 years proving myself through performance, believing excellence would shield me from prejudice. That night in the lobby shattered that illusion. The scene shifts to Aisha in her home office, reviewing news coverage on multiple screens. What I've come to understand is that power, even at the highest levels, remains conditional for people who look like me. My title didn't protect me from handcuffs. My credentials didn't prevent suspicion. My achievements didn't override assumptions. Cut to Aisha meeting with young professionals at a mentoring event. The most insidious aspect of bias is how it forces double consciousness. You're simultaneously yourself and aware of how others perceive you. Every space you enter, every achievement you earn comes with an invisible tax, the energy spent navigating others' assumptions. The camera follows Aisha, walking through Stanhope's lobby, now transformed with a diverse security team and new protocols. But what happened that night also revealed another truth. Systems can change when properly motivated. The police department implemented new protocols. The board embraced initiatives they'd previously questioned. The security company overhauled their training. Aisha pauses at the spot where she was handcuffed, then deliberately continues walking. The question isn't whether bias exists, it's whether we have the courage to confront it when we see it. Whether those with power are willing to examine their assumptions. Whether institutions will hold themselves accountable without public pressure. The scene returns to Aisha in her CEO office, looking out over the Chicago skyline. I didn't choose to become an advocate. Circumstance thrust that role upon me. But having been handed this platform, I refuse to waste it. Because the next person handcuffed in their own building might not have a chief of police on speed dial or a board of directors behind them. Their story might never make headlines. And that's precisely why mine must. 6 weeks after the incident, Aisha sat in the austere hearing room of the Chicago Police Accountability Board. The mahogany walls and formal proceedings contrasted sharply with the raw emotions still churning beneath her composed exterior. Officer Hill sat at the respondent's table, union attorney beside him, shoulders rigid with defiance. The board chair addressed the room. Today we consider the findings against Officer James Hill regarding the wrongful detention of Stanhope Financial CEO Aisha Jordan. As evidence unfolded, body camera footage, security video, dispatch recordings, Hill's expression remained stone-faced. His attorney argued procedural points, cited officer discretion, and suggested miscommunication rather than misconduct. When Aisha took the stand, she spoke with measured precision. I identified myself immediately. I provided credentials. I remained calm despite being handcuffed in my own building. Yet Officer Hill maintained restraints for 8 minutes after verification, questioned my authority repeatedly, and made dismissive comments about diversity hires. These actions reflect judgment clouded by preconception rather than evidence. The board's decision came swiftly. Termination upheld, pension benefits reduced, permanent record notation. Hill's face flushed crimson as the verdict was read. Outside the hearing room, reporters thrust microphones toward Aisha. Is justice served? One called out. Accountability is a beginning, not an endpoint, she replied. One officer's termination doesn't address systemic issues, but it establishes consequences for bias-influenced decisions. Across town, Northwestern Security Services faced their own reckoning. Independent auditors combed through every aspect of their operations: hiring practices, training protocols, incident reports, demographic data. The findings revealed disturbing patterns. Security personnel received minimal bias training. Suspicious person reports disproportionately targeted. Minorities. Client complaints about overzealous enforcement were routinely dismissed. The CEO of Northwestern, Michael Garrison, requested a meeting with Aisha. They sat in her office, the power dynamic unmistakable. Our audit revealed significant deficiencies, Garrison admitted, fidgeting with his tie. We're implementing comprehensive reforms, revamped training, diverse hiring targets, accountability metrics. After the fact, Aisha noted coolly. Yes, he acknowledged, discomfort evident. We should have been proactive rather than reactive. I'm personally committing to transformation, not just damage control. Aisha studied him, weighing sincerity against self-preservation. Actions will speak louder than promises, Mr. Garrison. I'll be watching closely. Northwestern's subsequent actions proved surprisingly substantive. They hired a respected diversity consultant, revamped their entire training program, and established quarterly review meetings with client representatives. Leonard Phillips, the guard who made the call, requested a transfer to training, where he now shares his experience as a cautionary tale during orientation sessions. The glass-walled conference room on Stanhope's 35th floor buzzed with activity. As Aisha convened the newly formed Inclusion Council, representatives from every department gathered around the table, a deliberately diverse group spanning race, gender, age, and organizational rank. Our goal isn't performative diversity, Aisha explained, standing before a presentation screen displaying initiative metrics. We're targeting structural change in hiring, promotion, lending practices, and corporate culture. The transformation had begun immediately after the incident. Stanhope's lobby now featured a security team that reflected Chicago's diversity. Identification protocols emphasized respect and verification rather than suspicion. The executive suite included more black and brown faces as Aisha accelerated recruitment of underrepresented talent. Most significantly, Stanhope launched the Financial Equity Foundation with a $100 million commitment, triple Aisha's original proposal. The foundation focused on expanding banking access in underserved communities, providing capital to minority entrepreneurs, and funding legal assistance for victims of discrimination. Even skeptical executives like Thomas Warner had shifted their stance. At today's meeting, he presented data comparing Stanhope's diversity metrics to industry benchmarks. We've moved from below-average representation to leading our sector, he noted with surprising enthusiasm. More importantly, our client acquisition rate has increased 12% in minority communities, representing $1.8 billion in new accounts. Karen Liu smiled. Turns out inclusion isn't just morally right, it's profitable. After the meeting, Aisha walked the executive floor, noticing subtle but meaningful changes. The portraits lining the hallway once showed only white male former CEOs. Now they included historical figures in finance from diverse backgrounds. The company newsletter highlighted employees from all levels. Even the cafeteria menu had expanded to include dishes reflecting various cultural traditions that in her office. Aisha reviewed the quarterly results with satisfaction. Stanhope's stock had not only recovered from its post-incident dip, but reached new heights. Industry publications that initially predicted her downfall now praised her crisis leadership and transformative vision. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Simone, her executive assistant, entered with a folder. The final numbers for the recruitment initiative. We've received triple the applications from minority candidates compared to last quarter. Aisha nodded, flipping through the data. And retention metrics, up 23%. The mentorship program is making a difference. The changes weren't merely cosmetic or temporary. They were becoming embedded in Stanhope's DNA. What began as a response to crisis had evolved into competitive advantage. The Chicago Economic Leadership Summit filled the grand ballroom of the Millennium Hotel with the city's most influential business leaders. As keynote speaker, Aisha approached the podium amid enthusiastic applause, a stark contrast to the polite golf claps that greeted her pre-incident appearances. She surveyed the audience: banking executives, tech entrepreneurs, retail magnates, and a significant contingent of young professionals of color who had specifically requested tickets to hear her speak. 3 months ago, I stood handcuffed in my own corporate headquarters, she began, her opening line silencing the room instantly. Today, I stand before you not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a leader offering clarity. The screens behind her displayed statistics in bold graphics. Black professionals representing less than 3% of executive leadership despite comprising 13% of the population. Studies showing identical resumes receiving 50% fewer callbacks when bearing ethnically identifiable names. Documented cases of successful minorities being questioned, detained, or removed from their workplaces. These aren't abstract concepts or political talking points, Aisha continued. They're daily realities that extract both personal and economic costs. Every time talent is overlooked due to bias, companies lose competitive edge. Every time achievement is questioned based on appearance, innovation suffers. Every time we pretend these issues don't exist in our enlightened corporations, we perpetuate the very problems we claim to oppose. She moved from behind the podium, addressing the audience directly. My experience generated headlines because of my position, but countless professionals face similar indignities without cameras recording or chief executives intervening. Their stories rarely make news, but their talent is equally wasted, their contributions equally diminished. The room remained rapt as she outlined Stanhope's concrete changes: measurable diversity targets with executive compensation tied to results, community investment initiatives, reformed security protocols, mentorship programs. The business case for inclusion isn't charity, it's strategy, she emphasized. Diverse teams outperform homogeneous ones by 35%. Companies in the top quartile for racial diversity are 33% more likely to exceed industry financial performance. These aren't feel-good metrics, they're profit drivers. She concluded with a challenge that silenced the room. Each of you holds power in your organizations. The question isn't whether bias exists in your company. It does. The question is whether you have the courage to measure it, confront it, and eliminate it. Not with platitudes or press releases, but with accountability and action. As she stepped back from the microphone, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Business reporters frantically typed notes. CEOs exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others inspired. Young professionals in the back rows wiped away tears. Afterward, a line formed of executives seeking advice on implementing similar initiatives. The conversation had shifted from whether change was necessary to how quickly it could be accomplished. In her Lincoln Park home, Aisha settled into her favorite armchair, finally exhaling after another demanding day. David brought her a glass of wine, sitting across from her with quiet understanding in his eyes. "The nightmares again last night?" he asked gently. She nodded. The incident had left invisible wounds that medical scans couldn't detect. The jolt of adrenaline when security approached her, the momentary panic when entering her own building after hours, the reflexive need to display ID even when recognized. Dr. Powell says it's normal, she replied. Trauma doesn't discriminate based on title or income. She had begun seeing a therapist specializing in race-based traumatic stress, refusing to minimize the psychological impact of the incident. Initially reluctant to discuss these sessions, she now mentioned them openly in interviews, normalizing mental health support for other executives. The foundation approved 15 new grants today, she shared, changing the subject to more energizing territory, including legal support for that delivery driver detained while dropping packages in Winnetka. The Financial Equity Foundation had quickly become her passion project, a mechanism for addressing injustice beyond her personal experience. Under her guidance, it provided resources for others navigating similar situations without her advantages. David squeezed her hand. You've created something remarkable from something terrible. Not by choice, she reminded him. But since this platform was thrust upon me, I refuse to waste it. Her leadership style had evolved subtly. Always competent and composed, she now added authenticity and advocacy. She shared personal experiences that previously seemed too vulnerable for a CEO to discuss. She challenged industry practices directly rather than navigating them quietly. She declined invitations from organizations with poor diversity records, explaining exactly wide AT industry gatherings. Younger executives, particularly women and minorities, gravitated toward her for advice. Her calendar now included regular mentoring sessions with promising professionals from underrepresented groups. The Aisha Jordan Leadership Program provided scholarships for minority students pursuing finance careers. Most surprisingly, several fellow CEOs had privately sought her counsel after facing their own reckonings with bias in their organizations. The incident had transformed her from peer to pioneer, her response establishing a blueprint for corporate America's overdue confrontation with inequity. In her home office, she reviewed applications for the foundation's next funding cycle. Among them was a proposal for a documentary series featuring successful professionals sharing their experiences with workplace discrimination and strategies for institutional reform. She paused, considering the potential impact of such stories reaching broader audiences. With decision made, she noted her approval and continued reading, determined that her experience would create ripples far beyond one night in a bank lobby. Every viewer watching has witnessed or experienced moments where belonging was questioned, authority was challenged based on appearance, or assumptions overshadowed accomplishments. Aisha's voice addresses the audience directly. These stories matter, not just for validation, but for change. Share your experience using #BelongingInPower. Visit stanhopequity.org to access resources for addressing workplace discrimination, connect with advocates, or apply for legal assistance. Through our foundation, the screen displays the website URL prominently. Your story might prevent someone else from standing handcuffed in their own space. Your voice might change policies that enable bias. Your courage might create workplaces where achievement transcends appearance. The conversations you start today build the equitable institutions of tomorrow. 1 year after the incident, Aisha stood before Stanhope's annual shareholder meeting presenting record profits and unprecedented growth in underserved markets. The diversity initiative, once questioned as idealistic, had become a cornerstone of the company's competitive strategy. Industry publications that initially predicted her focus on inclusion would distract from financial performance now studied the Stanhope model as a business case study. Officer Hill's termination was upheld through all appeals. The Chicago Police Department's reformed verification protocols became a template adopted by departments nationwide. Northwestern Security Services transformed from corporate liability to industry leader in equitable practices. Yet beyond these visible victories, Aisha recognized the fragility of progress. Each advancement faced resistance. Each policy required constant vigilance. Each success story competed with continuing injustices. In quiet moments, she reflected on the paradox of her position. It took being handcuffed as a CEO to gain the platform to address why anyone gets handcuffed based on appearance. The power to create change came through experiencing powerlessness. The opportunity to lead a movement emerged from being momentarily diminished. The true measure of progress wasn't in headlines or policy changes, but in daily realities. The black executive who entered her building after hours without security questioning her presence. The minority job candidates who received fair consideration without exceptional credentials. The young professionals who aspired to leadership positions once seen as inaccessible. The battle for equity continued, not as dramatic confrontations, but as persistent commitment to dismantling barriers invisible to those who never faced them. Progress wouldn't come through single incidents or individual champions, but through collective recognition that excellence and opportunity belong to no single color, gender, or background. Aisha's story wasn't an endpoint, but a beginning. One chapter in America's complex, continuing journey toward fulfilling its promise of equal opportunity. The handcuffs were removed in minutes, but their imprint remained, not as a wound, but as a reminder of work still unfinished.